Hi, Pinterest Driskell here with the Driskell Debrief. Thank you for joining us. I always look forward to our time together every Tuesday. You might notice that there's something a little different this week, maybe because I have two guests who are right beside me. What's up? Which we know is a bit of a different format. I've got with me Beth Matuga, who is working with the Florida House Democratic Campaign Committee, Shannon, who is our executive director, and we're going to have a great conversation tonight about breaking the Republican supermajority and why that is so important. But before we get into that, y'all, I just got to talk about this rally that happened over the weekend in New York. I think it was at Madison Square. Not good. Where there was a comedian on stage who said, I know, I usually go comedian, right? Oh, you think you're so funny, saying all this really awful stuff about many groups, many people, including Puerto Rico. So he's dissing American citizens, first of all. Like, let's start there, right? And it was just the most vile, abhorrent thing
since the last rally at Madison Square Garden in 1930 something.
Yeah.
Not great.
It was shameful. It was a disgrace. I denounced it in the strongest terms, as have many of our candidates and many people, frankly, around the country and around the world. And I was reminded by a friend, like, in times like these, if you're still an undecided voter, don't try to think so much about, like the other person and what they're off. Think about like the type of voter that you want to be and the type of person that you want to be. Do you want to stand up for that? Like, do you want to be a type of person who's okay with those racist comments? Are you okay with xenophobia? Are you okay with sexism? Are you okay with destroying democracy? If you're not, then the choice is pretty clear. But look inside yourself and determine who you are and what you want to vote for. So yeah, that type of hatred has no place in our country. I stand with our Puerto Rican community proudly. And if you haven't voted yet, you need to get out and vote because democracy is on the line. I feel like I say that quite a lot.
Well, it keeps happening, so it's worth repeating.
It's worth repeating. So the other thing that y'all hear me say a lot, besides that every Floridian deserves the freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe, is that at the Florida House Democratic Campaign Committee, we are laser focused on ending the Republican supermajority in the Florida House. We need to break that thing because having a supermajority, frankly, has been bad for government. So that's what we're here to talk about tonight. Let me just, let's get into it. Let's talk about what is a supermajority for starters. So whenever one of the chambers has 2/3 or more of either party, there's a supermajority, superminority situation. Right now, the Republicans in the Florida House and actually the Florida Senate have a supermajority. That means they have more than 2/3 of the members in that chamber. So an easy way to think about it, right? Like if we were at parity, if we were 50-50 and these were like scales, we'd be even. With a supermajority, it's tilted like this. And you can see that's a lot to try to to overcome if you're trying to win any vote. So Democrats are in a superminority, meaning that we have 1/3 or less of the votes in the Florida House. What it means to have a supermajority, frankly, is that the Republicans just have carte blanche to do whatever it is that they want to do. They don't have to come to the Democratic caucus and negotiate for anything. They don't care if their policy is reasonable or not. It kind of eliminates a check and balance in the legislative process. And we've been operating like that for 2 years. And I'll tell you, Beth, so when I first started 6 years ago, the Democratic caucus was 47 members in climbing, and the climate was very different. There was a lot more negotiation, a lot more collaboration. And all I'm saying, folks, is that we need to get back to some more balance. So let's talk a little bit about supermajorities and why it's so important to break them. I mean, why do you think it's important to break the supermajority in the House?
I guess I'll start. It's fundamentally anti-democratic. Supermajorities prevent people that we have duly elected and sent up to Tallahassee to represent their constituents. It prevents them from saying anything. It prevents them from making really bad bills less bad. And, sometimes that's very valuable, particularly with some of the bills that the Republicans proffer. Nobody likes a supermajority. It makes building coalitions harder, right? So, it used to be, I'm old enough to remember, it used to be that you had the opportunity to peel off a couple Republicans here or peel off a couple Democrats there, and you could build coalitions to get things passed or at least get things moving. And that is a fundamental part of our representative democracy. And you can't do that when a supermajority minority situation prevents you from having any shot at building coalitions like that. Everything comes from the top down. There are orders from on high about what you should do. And if you don't do those things, then you get in trouble. And that's no way to run a legislature. So it's bad for everybody. My lobbyist friends also will tell me, privately that it's not great for them either, right? Because if you can build more coalitions, you have more shots at getting things passed. You can pass them in different ways with different groups of people. You don't always have to just go to leadership and beg and beseech and plead for something to get through. You can do it in the way that is intended, which is by building coalitions of sometimes disparate people.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, then what exactly is it that we're here to do? Just take orders? Nobody likes that.
Yeah. Nobody likes that. Do you have something you want to add?
Well, I feel like this happened a long time ago. It's easy to forget, but this legislative agenda was designed to have DeSantis run for president. And this is the only 2-year period they've had. Well, right. I mean, that's why it's easy to forget. And in this 2-year period that they've had the supermajority, they've really abused the power. And I think that setting them back with 41 members, or setting them back with a supermajority, really validates that, right? It shows them that they took the right approach. They went really hard. They were rewarded for it. Whereas if we're able to claw some of that power back, it really, it shows even the moderates in that caucus that they went too far. They overstretched. They were punished for it.
Yeah.
Amen.
I really actually like that line of thinking, right? Like, do we want to reward the Republicans in the Florida legislature for the book bans? Do we want to give them a high five for saying that Black history has no merit? Do we want to, cheer them on when DeSantis pushes for these extreme abortion bans? I think there's really something to that, and it kind of emphasizes why it's important to vote, right? So, from the perspective of a lawmaker sitting in a supermajority, I can tell you there are a couple, there are a lot, actually. There's 6 constitutional amendments that are on the ballot that you will have the opportunity to vote for. And 2 of the ones that are getting a lot of attention are Amendment 3, which would legalize adult use of marijuana. And then there's Amendment 4, which would protect access to abortion and basically limit unnecessary governmental interference in our private healthcare decisions. Let's just talk about Amendment 4 for a minute, if we could. Right. So in Florida, we had back-to-back extremist abortion bans. The first one provided no exception for rape or incest, no exception. And if you tuned in last week, you know that we had a special guest, Hadley Duvall, who's from Kentucky and who shared her story about being molested by her stepfather and just what a traumatic experience that was, and how she would not have been able to have any choice if Florida's abortion ban had been in effect. Then you got this second one that removes abortion as an option before most women even know that they are pregnant. So, if Amendment 4 passes, should it passes, and we really hope that it does, the legislature will have the opportunity to pass what's known as an implementing bill. And all that means is that the legislature gets to kind of, define the terms and talk about how it's actually going to work. Let me say this very clearly. We cannot trust them to do this right. We cannot trust them to do this right. When there was the Amendment 4 back in 2018, where we gave returning citizens the right to vote, those who had been formerly convicted of felonies the right to vote, even though it passed with overwhelming support from Floridians, the Republicans in the Florida legislature, some of whom I'm still serving with right now, completely undermined the will of the voters by passing an implementing bill that said, but what about your fines and fees? And we said, well, why don't you create a database to tell people what their fines and fees are?
No,
they're like,
not going to do that.
Yeah, they said, why would we do that,
Man.
So, listen, it matters that we break the Republican supermajority so we have as many Democrats as possible in the legislature so we can do what Beth just talked about, which is building out a coalition to get some crossover so that we can have, hopefully, a good implementing bill once Amendment 4 passes so that we can honor your intentions, the voters, because your will is really important. And that's a really important thing. So, next week at this time, we will actually be waiting for the results of these races. But before we get there, I thought it'd be important to talk about it. What does the FHDCC do? What is our role in trying to break the Republican supermajority?
So, we're like any other committee that focuses on campaigns, right? Our job is to find the most competitive races that exist in the state, give them all the resources that we can to enable them to win their races. And, that means recruiting candidates in the off year. That means training them up. That means getting them staffed up. That means putting field resources on the ground. That means polling. That means identifying issue frames for all these races, right? It really means setting up everything around a candidate that they could possibly want to, one, encourage quality people to run for office, and two, hopefully they win the races. I think we feel pretty solid about how that effort's gone so far, right? We have a great slate of candidates we put a lot of resources into, and we've been proud of working with them over the last really 18 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it's probably an important distinction to note that this is the incarnation of an entity previously known as House Victory, and some of our viewers may remember us as that. In 2022, the leader established the FHDCC, which is an affiliated party committee, and it has the powers and the rights of the state party. And so we're very happy to have that organization. We still obviously have a great presence in the FDP proper, but we are our own entity, and as such, we are responsible for flipping state house seats and defending our incumbents, also very important.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that great credit to you, leader. The FHDCC has really grown on your leadership, and I think that Rep. Honchowski, who is your successor, is going to inherit a really wonderful program.
Well, thanks for mentioning that, and I appreciate that. Establishing that party committee was important because, frankly, this is what our counterparts do, right? And I don't want to see Democrats suffering from a lack of infrastructure. Like, in fact, as leader, a big thing to me is trying to build out infrastructure that will continue to help the caucus do better into the future, because otherwise, what's the point, right? And so we've been working as hard as we can to build out this effort, and it's allowed us to do some very innovative field programs, which actually we should probably talk about. Let's talk about the field program. So this has been, I think, like a dream come true, because you guys know, if you know me, I'm a Florida native. I care greatly about this state. I don't like the direction that this state has been heading in, and it's very important to me. I mean, I eat, sleep, breathe this. They work me pretty hard, honestly.
What? Come on.
We all work hard. We have a lot of fun while we do it. But this work matters. And a lot of what we do is so that we can actually have a field program on the ground out there talking to voters. Let's tell the people what we do.
Yeah. So where this really started in earnest was the HD 35 special election that happened earlier this year, which I'm sure you've talked about many times. But what we had happen was a district came online and had a special election where we had a -3 vote by mail enrollment advantage. And we knew we had to win this seat, and we knew that we had to focus in on it. And the only way to get it to a point where we felt to be competitive in the special was to re-enroll as many people in vote by mail as possible, because the Republicans kicked everybody off the rolls at the start of this year. So we took that.
That's actually, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's actually a really good point, which is another really terrible Republican initiative, which is a bunch of folks who are expecting a vote by mail ballot.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't know that they're all getting kicked off for reasons that I can't really articulate. We're just kicking everybody off for funsies.
Yeah.
There are lots of you on, now you're off.
Yeah, that's right. And so, that was a pretty significant change that a lot of people weren't expecting. And as a result, we really were staring down the barrel of the VBM problem.
I got it now. See, now Beth's got me started, because it was not an innocent thing in kicking everybody off the vote by mail rolls.
What
happened? I know.
You don't
hold the phone. So what happened is that in 2020, right, we had a global pandemic, and people were encouraged to vote by mail. In fact, the governor himself said that Florida was the gold standard of elections around the country. Okay, we're the gold standard. They came back the very next year and passed this really awful elections bill that put up so many obstacles to voting, so many obstacles to registering people to vote. They kicked everybody off the vote by mail rolls. And there were texts that were uncovered between leadership in the Republican legislature that basically said, oh no, the Democrats are gaining on us in vote by mail. What can we do? And they then passed this law under the guise of, I don't know what the guise was. I don't even remember what they said, but I got to tell you that it wasn't legit. It was completely nefarious. I don't remember what kind of, BS excuse they made up at the time. Anyway, back to Drew.
Back to you, Drew.
So we started in the hole, and our solution to that was to put about 80 canvassers on the ground between August and November of 2023. And that got us from a -3% VBM disadvantage towards a 12% advantage when ballots dropped for the special election. We won that special election, and largely due to vote by mail, where not only did we run up the score with Democrats, but the MPAs who we signed up to vote by mail performed massively in our favor. There's a lot of benefits for Democrats in the state of Florida, especially at the legislative level, to have high levels of vote by mail participation. The biggest one is that the last couple of weeks in Florida are typically really drowned out with Republican communications, right? So we won that special election. We took that model and replicated it across the Orlando districts, where, right now there are currently about 150 people who work for the FHDCC program to flip these seats. And the vast majority of them are canvassers in the Orlando area who are signing folks up to vote by mail all through the fall of this year. They're now chasing those votes. They're getting folks to bring their ballots to drop boxes and to vote in person at this point. Ballots should be put in the mail at this point. You vote in person or drop your ballot off. And that's really what we have folks out there doing. And the benefit of this is, candidly, we do not have the field resources that we've had in the past in presidential cycles. And a lot of how
meaning the state of Florida.
We mean the state of Democrats in the state of Florida
Yeah.
do not have the field resources that we've been able to rely on in the past. And a lot of what we've thought about is you take a look at these super voters, these 3 out of 3 voters who didn't turn out in 2022, people who voted in general after general who just didn't come out in the midterm. And a lot of what we thought is these people had turnout treatment cycle after cycle after cycle. Millions of dollars was put into turning out people who are highly transient, who move around, who have real jobs, who work 2 or 3 jobs in the Orlando area, who didn't turn out because for the first time in several cycles, they weren't given massive turnout treatments. You can talk more about that.
Sure. Yes, it turns out that a combination of we're deleting hundreds of millions of dollars from the ecosphere, the Democratic ecosphere in Florida, over the course of 2 presidential election cycles, coupled with very far-reaching, well-funded, and to their great credit, well-executed voter suppression techniques, equals a real problem for us. You may be shocked to learn. And so, we have to be realistic about this as Democrats in Florida, right? Like, we have to be realistic about the fact that we cannot replicate the FHDCC, Leader Driskell, Drew Shannon, Beth Matuga. We cannot replicate the hundreds of millions of dollars that is normally spent in Florida on a presidential election cycle. But what we can do, we can control what's within our control, right? We can put these voter contact programs, partisan paid voter contact programs on the ground. We can take margins and flip them, such as we did with the VBM in HD 35. We can perform GOTV in our targeted races. We can do persuasion at the doors for our own candidates. We can go to a door and say, hi, I'm a Democrat. I would like you to vote for this Democrat. And that's really powerful and very important.
Yeah.
And it's pretty, simple blocking and tackling, but man, it's tough. It takes an awful lot of money that you have to raise. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's not glamorous, right? But it is absolutely fundamental. It's how we want HG 35. And if we're successful in 7 days, it will be the great component to our success.
Yeah. And let me say, because we've talked a lot about HG 35. So that is House District 35 in the Orange County, in the Orlando and Kissimmee area. That is Representative Tom Keene, who we elected in that special election. We love Commander Keene. He worked so hard in that race. He's working so hard in his reelection, as are all of our candidates, as are all of our incumbents. By the way, we have incumbents who are not in these flip seats, who are also working very hard. I think it also, I should say, right, like this is just like, this is our lane right here, right? It's these House seats.
That's right.
We narrow the field and try to go deeper rather than wide, although there are many wonderful candidates running. If I had all the money in the world, I would fund them all. There are many different organizations and entities who are helping out. You've got the state party, the local parties. You've got, coalition groups who are on the ground. You've got donors who have helped, like so many people help in these efforts, and they all kind of have their little lanes, and everybody's running towards the finish line to try to get Florida as close to as many victories as possible next Tuesday. And I salute them all because it's really hard work.
It takes a village.
It takes a village. We see you, we appreciate you. And I just thought it was important to uplift that But this is my team. This is actually just a representation of our team. We have even more folks who work with us, but I'm so glad to have Beth and Drew at the helm and helping to lead this effort. Because I think they're the best in the biz.
You're not so bad yourself.
I'm not so bad myself. Did you hear that? Now, you might not know this for the audience, but I do a lot of impersonations.
You do. Oh, they're so good.
Yeah, I do a lot.
For any of you out there who ever have her captive and you got to kill some couple minutes, just pick somebody in the room and ask her to do an impersonation. She's so good, guys. It's so good.
True. It's true. I try to hide it, but you see it a little bit tonight. Anyway, so let's talk. We've talked about the importance of breaking the supermajority. We've talked about how we're going about this. Let's talk a little bit about, how are things looking right now? Like, how does this compare to past election cycles?
So I'll go broad and say that we've talked a lot about the VBM problem, and a big, long-term consequence of that is that we do not have a good comparison point for this election cycle, right? You look at HD 35, not to keep harping on it, but HD 35 actually has the highest percentage of VBM enrollment of any House district in the state. And there's a simple reason for that. It's because both sides have spent collectively $750,000, Republicans and Democrats, to enroll people in vote by mail, right? And it shows. It's had one of the highest return rates of anywhere in the state. That said, you look all over and vote by mail is down among Democrats compared to 2020. Very obvious reasons, COVID and the fact they were kicked off the rolls. So, we're left in a place where super voters have turned out of both sides, right? I'm sure that folks have seen long lines at early voting locations all over the state. There's high participation where, Democrats right now, where this election is going to be decided is two places. One, Democrats who are middle propensity Democrats, right? Folks who sometimes vote, sometimes don't vote, typically vote in presidentials, definitely probably missed 2022. Those Democrats showing up or not, probably on election day, is going to determine 90% of the House races that we're really concerned about. That's one. And two is the NPA question, right? In all of these districts, and in one district specifically we're going after, there are more NPAs than Republicans.
What's an NPA?
An NPA is a non-party affiliated voter. These are independents, right? These are folks who are not registered. Florida has party registration, so you can be a registered Democrat or a registered Republican. Non-party affiliates are the highest growing block of voters in the state of Florida. And they're going to decide every one of these elections. Again, the HD 35 special, we won that race with a 5% turnout disadvantage. Republicans were 44% of the vote. Democrats were 39% of the vote, but we won by 2 points. That was because we achieved massive margins with non-party affiliated voters. These are folks who we won in 2022, right, across all of our House districts. And the problem was that we had such a Democratic turnout issue, which is why we've poured so many resources into field this year. So that's what we're looking at right now, right, is all of these races are polled with the assumption that there will be a turnout disadvantage, very slight, but a turnout disadvantage in these competitive seats. And that's because the Democratic coalition in Florida is really all the Democrats, but then a significant portion of the NPAs. And, many of these people are voters of color. Many of them are very young, right? You look at the Orlando area, a lot of NPAs are under 30, right? These are people who traditionally 15 years ago probably would have been Democratic voters, who nationally are less likely to register with any party, but we still pick up massive percentages of them, and that's really what we're looking at right now in these early votes. So,
yeah, and lots of Puerto Rican folks who probably really hate what's going on right now. So come on, we don't say that kind of terrible things about Puerto Rican voters, but the other thing that I want to point out about the NPAs is that what's driving them into our arms, I think, is tied directly to the supermajority situation, right? Which is this just overreach and just bad ideas that we are just, we're a factory, it seems like, for bad ideas down here in Florida. And I don't think that's accidental, but, the insurance crisis, abortion, all of these issues are driving NPA voters and independent voters directly into our arms. And again, we welcome them, but there does seem to be a point where folks say enough is enough. And I think we may have found it. I sure hope we have. We certainly found it in HD 35 in January. So.
Yeah. I hope we found it. I mean, I think we have found it. I can't tell you the number of doors that I knock, whether it's in my own race or helping other candidates, where people on the door, they just want to know, like, where are you on affordability? What are you going to do for affordable housing? How are you going to lower my property insurance? And they are tired of the culture wars. Like, they're tired. They can't understand why we have a state legislature and a governor who focuses on so many issues that don't actually improve people's lives. Like, they're tired of book bans. They don't want to talk about them. I mean, they'll talk about them, right? But just to say that we don't want them. And so I hope that you're right, Beth. I think that you're right. And I hope, like you were mentioning, Drew, that this gets MPAs to vote our way. But the other thing that Drew was mentioning, right? Democrats, you got to get out there and vote. Like, this is your shot. This is your chance. Yeah. Like, this is your vote is your voice. And if your vote weren't so important, they wouldn't do everything in their power to stop it and to try to take it away from you. So just know that you actually have the power. And I think sometimes people think about this work, they think about government as more complicated than it needs to be. Like, it's actually, like, you got to show up. Think about it like tug of war. We talk about this sometimes. If the kids from your neighborhood and the kids from the neighborhood next door are playing tug of war and more kids show up from the neighborhood next door, like, who's going to win? They're going to win every time. This is what happens when we don't show up, Democrats. Like, we have to show up for ourselves. And so please make sure early voting goes until November 3rd. You can vote in person on Election Day, November 5th, but I encourage you not to wait. So we've talked about the supermajority and what it is. We've talked about why it's important, particularly when we get back next legislative session with these implementing bills, with these constitutional amendments. We talked about our strategy. I think that this is great. Like, what I would say is that we are doing everything in our control. We have worked so very hard on this, so very hard. We're prepared for every situation. I would say that it's up to the voters now in terms of the turnout. Like, we really need the turnout, and just imagine what you could do. You could be, particularly if you were in one of these districts in Central Florida or South Florida, where these seats are, really anywhere, wherever you are, you can be a part of that narrative. You can be a part of that silver lining on next Tuesday, where we have a great story to tell in Florida about what has happened in terms of breaking the Republican supermajority. And for me, it's important because I want to leave this caucus in an even better situation for Rep. Hunchofsky when she comes on as leader. And I want to see us start attracting back national investment into the state.
Amen. Yeah. We have to prove that we can do it, right? And that doesn't mean flipping the chamber overnight, right? That doesn't mean we're going to win everything and everything will be fine. It's baby steps. We have to demonstrate competency. We have to chip away at what is a problem 25 years in the making, right? We didn't get into this fix overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight. And thinking that we will leads to folly. And so, like I said before, it's not glamorous. It's frequently not great fun. Don't you love those Hampton Inns we put in? They're lots of fun. But it's tough work that is absolutely vital. And I give you great credit because, guys, this is a thankless job, like legitimately a thankless job. And you do great.
Thank you. I don't get paid for this. That's what you're trying to say.
I got $1,000 a year. Come on, man.
Man, I got a day job, but I love this and I love our state and I love you. And this is why we work so hard. So let me give you any closing thoughts, though, before I go to close this out?
Well, to Beth's point, I think that what we need to give people is a reinvigorated culture of competitive elections, right? I think that people,
it's poetic.
I feel that this has been like a gut belief I've had for a while that was confirmed to me twice on doors, so now it's rock solid, is that if people don't feel like they're in a competitive election, they're just not going to vote. People don't like to vote in a race that they feel has been decided.
Yeah.
And I think what we're trying to do in these house races is give them that opportunity to vote for something that can be decisive at a statewide level. And the more we do that, the more people hear about that, the more that people who aren't in these seats are going to feel that way, right? Yeah. And that we can start seeing some of this Democratic turnout come back.
It's almost like you can build on victories and really eventually get where you need to be.
Right.
Yeah. So. Momentum, right? Like, it's easier when an object's in motion, it's easier to keep it moving than to get it to go when it stops. So listen, Thank you for tuning in. I've got a few parting words for you because we're getting so close to Election Day, friends, and everything is on the line. Like, it is all on the line. So we really need you to turn out, and we need you to do what you can. Talk to your friends and family. Make sure that they have a plan to vote, because people who have a plan to vote are far more likely to actually follow through with it. So you can get out and vote now. Early voting, again, goes through November 3rd, and you can vote on Election Day, November 5th. But please don't wait. We would recommend strongly that you vote early, because I don't know if y'all remember, from our Floridians out there, we just had 2 hurricanes back to back.
Yeah.
And if you were in the path of those hurricanes, like I was here in Tampa Bay, completely disrupted life for quite some time. And so you want to have that insurance policy. Go ahead and get out and vote early, because you never know.
Insurance is expensive.
I've heard. I've heard. Listen,
It was an insurance joke.
That was funny. That was funny. I see what you did there. So your proper plan should include your location. It should include your time. It should include the date that you're going to vote. I had a dear friend who went to vote yesterday and thought that he could vote anywhere early voting in the state, but you must early vote in your county. Now, you can vote at any location in the county, but you've got to vote in your county for early voting. So please know that. I want you to also please prepare yourself for the ballot. There are 6 constitutional amendments. So when you get your ballot, don't be overwhelmed. It's okay. It might look a little long. That's okay. I promise you, it won't take you that much time to vote if you prepare. It only took me a few minutes, honestly, to kind of fill in those bubbles. I mean, it's just like back in school where we used to have the Scantrons. I'm dating myself.
Hey, I remember Scantrons.
Oh, you had
Scantron.
Oh, okay. All
Blue
right.
books. You had blue book?
No.
What is that?
What? She went to fancy schools. I went to a state school. So that's how it goes. Yeah. We had blue book. You had fancy stuff.
Oh, for the test.
Yeah.
Yeah, blue book.
Okay. Well, I don't know what goes on at Yale.
You did that intentionally. You take that back.
I'm sorry. That was so insulting.
Oh my gosh. People, can you believe it?
I can't
This
believe
is my
it.
team. All right. The point of it is, make sure you have your plan to vote. I think that was the plan. That was a vote. That was the thing we were talking about.
I'm
tired.
sorry. That was such an insult that you just derailed.
Yeah.
I know. I'm like, I can't even think
Balance
straight.
Scantron.
The ballots. Thank you. 6 constitutional amendments. Do your homework. I want to strongly urge you to vote yes on Amendment 3. I saw an article in the Miami Herald today, and I was absolutely appalled, because it has confirmed what a lot of us have known, which is that Black residents were prosecuted far more harshly, like arrested and prosecuted more harshly for marijuana possession. And there are a lot of folks sitting in prison right now on marijuana charges. And it's time for us to pass Amendment 3. It's time for us to move forward with decriminalization, because this has ripped apart a lot of families in our community, in my community, and in many communities. And I really want to see it pass. So that's something that you can do. You can vote yes on Amendment 3. I retweeted that article, or reposted that article to X if you have any interest in reading it. The second thing is voting yes on Amendment 4. The stories that I have heard have been heartbreaking. I'm talking the patient stories. I'm talking stories from healthcare providers and what the stress that they go through, the risk of losing their license just because they're practicing medicine in the way that they're taught. I'm talking about women bleeding out in parking lots, women being told to go away until they enter sepsis, meaning their body has become so infected that they're at risk of dying to get healthcare. This cannot be Florida. This cannot be America in modern times. It's not okay.
It's barbaric.
It's barbaric. You have a chance to do something about it, and that's voting yes on Amendment 4. I'll also post to my social media so that you guys have it, particularly if you're in Hillsborough County, the voter guide with recommended votes for different candidates and on these constitutional amendments. So maybe that'll help you out. The other thing, if you're in Hillsborough County, you can vote yes to renew the county, or the community investment tax, the CIT. Please know that this is not a new tax. There's been a lot of misinformation and disinformation spread about that, saying we don't need a new tax. The CIT already exists. This is to renew it. It goes towards a lot of really wonderful programs and essential services in our community. I mean, if you like fire stations, I mean, I do. When I call,
When my house is on fire, I like people to come.
I like
to
people
help me out.
I like them to come quickly.
Yeah.
So please vote yes to renew the CIT. It is essential. And please also vote for the millage for our public schools. I attended a great presentation by the superintendent of schools, Van Ayers, on Friday, where he really broke it down. There's information out there. You can Google it to see more detailed information about what's happening with that. But it will allow Hillsborough County schools to be more competitive, to start to begin approaching payment of teachers for what they're worth, plus all of the bus drivers and the support staff. And I could show you, I don't have it with me, but there's a chart that shows like all the counties around us have added this millage. And so it makes it difficult. There are actually teachers who might live in Hillsborough, but drive to Manatee County or drive to Sarasota County because they get paid more. And so it's a brain drain in Hillsborough, and we need to pay teachers what they're worth. So please vote yes on the millage. That's very important. And I think that's all I have for you today.
Boy, we've done it all.
We've done it all.
Drew, anything else?
This time in a week.
Yeah.
This time in a week. So let me tell you, keep the hope, friends. Don't lose your hope. Keep your faith. I know things might look crazy and things feel very heavy in politics right now, but there's something that you can do, and it's called voting. So make sure that you do that on or before November 5th. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Hug, hug, group hug, group hug, group hug.
All right.